The movie that I chose is called Tell No One. It's a thriller film directed by Guillaume Canet, where in this film, nothing is as it seems. The film is about a pediatrician, a doctor, whose wife was killed while they were alone in the woods in the middle of, well, somewhere in France. Because of the fact that they were alone with seems like no one else was around. Alexander Beck, the main character, was suspected of her murder. The murder was later attributed to a serial killer who had killed 7 other women in a sacrificial kind of specific kind of method. That serial killer had denied killing Margot Beck, but cops at that time didn't believe him because of the circumstances around her death. Flash forward 8 years. Alexander Beck, the main character, and the husband of Margot Beck, is now a well-respected doctor with a thriving practice. One day, he discovers that the case into the death of his wife is being reopened by the police. The police had discovered 2 bodies next to where the body of Margot was discovered, and so they believed that there was a connection to it, and they decided to reopen the case. Alexander Beck becomes a suspect once again in her death. He was a suspect originally before the serial killer, but then they came up with the serial killer angle, and so he was cleared at the moment, but now he's back to being a suspect, especially when evidence seems to be pointing right at him. While being on the run, Alexander decides to look into the case himself and not trust things to the police. He discovers that his wife had been having an affair, was involved with this guy by the name of Philippe Neville, the son of a local aristocrat by the name of Gilbert Neville. He also discovers that his wife discovered that Philippe was a pedophile rapist. He she had he discovers that she had enlisted the help of her father, a captain in the police, to cover up the fact that she had shot Philippe while trying to extract a confession from him. When Gilbert discovered that Margot had something to do with the death of his son, he sent goons to try to track Margot down and kill her. Jacques was able to convince one of the goons to double-cross Gilbert and stage Margot's death, and Margot was able to get away for the moment. That was 8 years ago, and then fast forward 8 years, Gilbert sends more goons when he discovers that Margot may not be dead, and he wants them to track down and kill her. And in the process of tracking her down, these goons kill someone really close to Alexander and really close to Margot in an attempt to discover where Margot is. Uh, Fortunately, although those goons did come really close in one scene to finding Margot, they never did, and Alexander is utilized by the police to extract a confession from Margot's father as to his part in this entire mess. And her father had confessed to the fact that it was actually Margot that had killed Philippe, when the official story that he was telling the police on tape was that he, the her father, was the killer. And he confessed to being on Gilbert's payroll. The film utilizes numerous flashbacks to tell the story of Dr. Beck and his wife, the romantic tale of how they knew each other most of their life and how they grew up as kids together, and then eventually how they fell in love, got married, that kind of thing. And then it utilizes flashbacks to when Jacques Laurentien, Margot's father, confesses to the crime of killing Philippe Neville, and that it wasn't really Jacques that had killed Philippe, but it was really Margot when Philippe was assaulting her, and she did it as self-defense. Without flashbacks at the most critical moments in the film, we may not fully understand the entire story, or the director may not have been fully able to tell the story without utilizing flashbacks. And I discovered a film critique by Beverly Burning, and I agree with one concept or one point that she brings up in her critique. This film was adapted from an American novel and utilizes very familiar American things in the film. It's very similar to American films or American police procedural TV shows. And it just seems, watching this movie, as if it were an American TV show or American movie, but set in France, utilizing French characters and French actors and people that speak in French. Basically, I do agree that there's not a lot of French culture that comes through this film since it's so Americanized. Uh, it's really hard to really understand or really connect with the French culture because it's so Americanized in this film. And one of the only things that I noticed in this film that seems to be entirely European is the amount of cigarette smoking that goes on in the film, and we don't see that much here in America. But apart from that, I wasn't able to connect to the French culture throughout this film. This film was entertaining to watch. Overall, the film told an interesting story, and I was able to connect to the main character of Andre Beck and his desire to find out what really happened in those woods. And the film kept me guessing, kept me wondering until the very end. Because the actors did such a great job performing, I was transported into a world where nothing is as it seems. If you find something out, it may not necessarily be true. Um, I was right there with Dr. Beck when he discovered that his wife may actually not be dead, as he had thought for 8 years, and that she was in fact alive. And then I was right there with him when he discovered that it wasn't her father that had killed uh, Philippe, but it was Margot herself. And then I was right there at the end, at the conclusion of the film, where he sees her again for the first time in 8 years, and the conflicting feelings that he feels with seeing her and knowing what she did.